You know, I'm disappointed. We were supposed to have a hurricane.
You're disappointed?
Yes, we didn't have
Well, can I just say many of us were praying against you.
Oh, well, I usually pray, but this is going to be a little hurricane. It'll give us some wind. I didn't even have much wind. It was nothing.
It was perfect.
Perfect.
It was perfect.
All right.
It came
hey, let
through
me ask you
softly,
something.
it left.
Would you believe that a man in London, England, was arrested by the police? Guess what his offense was? He quoted Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
Quoted him in public and was arrested in England. You Brits, think of it. Winston Churchill, one of the greatest prime ministers the country ever had, eloquent man, a person here in 2014 was quoting him, and the police arrested him for hate speech. Well, was 9/11 only the beginning? Could we see jetliners blown up in the air? The government says it's possible, and they're trying to stop it from happening. So they've unveiled a plan that hopes to protect flights coming into the United States.
That plan comes amidst concerns that the terrorists now have their own state in Iraq. Ephraim Graham has the story.
There are new security rules for people taking direct flights from foreign airports to the United States. Electronic devices like cell phones, DVD players, and laptop computers must be turned on and working properly at security, or they may be kept off the plane. It's an inconvenience many overseas travelers say they're prepared to handle.
I'm not going to stop flying just because of things like this. You know, then terrorists win if you stop flying.
TSA has new concerns bomb makers could be hiding explosives in such devices, and that terrorists are hard at work trying to develop an explosive that could go undetected by airport security.
Our job is to try to anticipate the next attack, not simply react to the last one.
This latest directive comes because of growing fears radicals from Al-Qaeda's Yemen branch may be looking to organize a terrorist attack. That same branch was responsible for the 2009 underwear bomber. Officials also believe some foreign fighters now in Syria are carrying passports, offering easy access to the United States. And with militants declaring an Islamic State in conquered territories of Syria and Iraq, critics charge the White House has allowed a new terrorist state to form.
This didn't have to happen. This is a failure of United States policy. And by the way, there still is none that I can discern, either a policy or a strategy to handle this situation. This guy Baghdadi, when he left Camp Bucca, the prison camp that we ran, he said, "See you in New York." We now have the largest and richest enclave of radical terrorism in history that not only encompasses Iraq, as we know, but Iraq and Syria.
Syria and Iraq have become training grounds for jihadists from America and the West. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
I'll tell you what, policy does matter. And if you've got people making policy that don't know what they're doing, you can get hurt. That's what it amounts to. If guys at the top screw up, and they're doing it regularly now, the blowback can be very, very painful for all of us. Well, in other news, both Republicans and Democrats are criticizing the administration for its handling of the immigration crisis. John Jessup has that story from Washington. Here's John.
Pat, that crisis is getting worse, and the Secretary of Homeland Security says it might be a long time before deportation proceedings are carried out for the tens of thousands of unaccompanied minors illegally crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. More than 50,000 have already made that trek so far this year. Members of both parties say the Obama administration has mishandled the situation. Texas Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar says the administration is one step behind a major dilemma that was foreseeable, while Governor Rick Perry says he warned the White House about this crisis over 2 years ago.
And we're seeing that become reality today. This is a failure of diplomacy. It is a failure of leadership from the administration in Washington, D.C.
Johnson says the border crisis is a legal and humanitarian dilemma for the United States.
Not open to illegal migration, and we are taking a number of steps to address it, including turning people around faster.
Johnson says the administration is processing adults who enter the country illegally much more quickly and is opening more detention facilities. The Islamic group Hamas is promising revenge on Israel after several of its members were killed in airstrikes early today. Tensions have been rising between Israel and Hamas since 3 Israeli teens were kidnapped and later killed. And now 6 Jewish suspects have been arrested for the murder of a Palestinian teenager that may have been a revenge killing. Chris Mitchell has that story from Jerusalem.
Israeli police arrested 6 Jewish suspects in connection with the murder of 16-year-old Mohammed Abu Qadir. The murder sparked Arab rioting in Jerusalem and northern Israel. In Jerusalem, rioters destroyed segments of the new light rail train tracks and some stations. The rioting started here in Shuafat, an Arab neighborhood in Jerusalem. You can see some of the damage here, and this morning they've begun to clean up. This is the neighborhood where Abu Qadir lived, and relatives say he was abducted just hours after the 3 Jewish teens were buried. This video shows Mohammed being pushed into a car. Police found his charred body a short time later in a Jerusalem forest. An autopsy showed he had been burned alive. Israeli leaders condemned the murder.
We shall not cover anything. We shall discover all the people that have acted criminally against somebody else, killed, kidnapped, tortured, and on that we shall not make any compromise.
Adding fuel to this combustible atmosphere, this video shows Israeli police beating Mohammed's cousin, 15-year-old Tariq Abu Qadir, an Arab-American citizen, during protests. Israel says it opened an investigation into the incident.
Where did you go to? Like the first part of Shafat, like in the front of Beit Hanina. Yeah, and then they came attack me and I woke up in the hospital.
If the policeman brutally beat a boy, that is illegal in Israel and all over the world. And if this is indeed the case, they will be brought to justice.
As the mourning continued for Mohammed, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke by phone to his father. He said, "I would like to express my outrage and that of the citizens of Israel over the reprehensible murder of your son. We denounce all brutal behavior. The murder of your son is abhorrent and cannot be countenanced by any human being." Israel's Shin Bet, meanwhile, announced it had arrested one of the terrorists involved in the kidnap and murder of the Israeli teens. That drama tormented the nation for 18 days until the boys' bodies were found. Since then, terrorists have launched more than 160 rockets at southern Israel, damaging buildings but not causing injury. Overnight, Israel attacked 14 terror targets in Gaza, killing a number of Hamas members. Tensions are still running high, though Israelis are hoping the summer will cool down. But no one knows yet if this could be the beginning of a third Intifada uprising. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Shuafat, Jerusalem.
While they may be looking for a cool-down pad, as Chris mentioned in his report, things only look as if they're heating up.
Well, when summer comes, it always leads to violence. People are unhappy, they're hot, and they can't stay indoors very much. Air conditioning isn't working, and it's hot outside, and so they're miserable, and so they want to get out and do something. The term intifada means shaking. And Yasser Arafat called for an intifada. They had got a tremendous peace agreement. I mean, the Israeli government had just about given him everything you could possibly give somebody, and he wanted more. And because they wouldn't give him that, he said, let's have a shaking. So they had this tremendous uprising. This could be the same thing. It sounds to me like it's a keg of powder just waiting to be ignited, and this might be the spark that does it. It's a terrible shame, but what it'll do is bring the great powers down on Israel, and they will never blame the Palestinians or Hamas. They'll always blame Israel. But Israel has certainly a right not to be hit by Katyusha rockets or by Scud missiles from Gaza. So what do? It's a dilemma that the only way to do it is for the peace of God to come on that country. There needs to be the peace of God, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. Well, we've got good news from Nigeria, so let's have that story. Here's John.
That's right, Pat. 60 Nigerian women and girls kidnapped by the Islamic terrorist group Boko Haram escaped late last week. An official in Chibok verified that they got away while their captors fought a battle with Nigerian government troops. It is believed they were kidnapped about 2 weeks ago. Now, Boko Haram previously took some 300 schoolgirls from a school in April, in a story that gained worldwide attention. At least 200 of them are still in captivity. Well, the world's biggest oil producer isn't Saudi Arabia or any other Middle Eastern country. It's the United States. The U.S. has taken over the #1 position, according to a report from Bank of America. A bank analyst tells Bloomberg News the shale oil boom is playing a key role, and that if the U.S. didn't have the energy supply, prices at the pump would be completely unaffordable. One key reason for the increase in U.S. energy is fracking, which brings oil out of shale rock formations. But many environmentalists oppose fracking and are trying to stop it by regulations in some towns. And Pat, the 2 states that are almost solely responsible for this oil boom are North Dakota and Texas.
That is exactly right. You know, apparently the shale is the source bed of the oil. That's where it's located. And there are billions and billions and billions, hundreds of billions of barrels of oil in this shale. And up to this time, we've never been able to get it. So I think it was the Williams Oil Company out in Texas that devised a way of they drilled down, you know, let's just say 5,000, 6,000 feet, and then they go laterally. And now the laterals are going out really tremendous distances, 12,000 feet and things like that. And the returns are just enormous. So but they've got the Eagle Ford in Texas. They've got the what's up there in North Dakota, which is the one you hear most about. They've got a big shale bed in Pennsylvania. They've got the Niobrara out in Colorado, and there's just many shales, and they just keep on producing this stuff. It'll go on and on and on. But interestingly, the environmentalists up in New York won't let New York enjoy the boom. So Pennsylvania's enjoying it, but not New York, because the environmentalists have got them by the throat, and that isn't too good.
Egypt's most famous Christian convert from Islam was recently sentenced to 5 years in prison. Christianity Today reports Mohammed Maghazi was charged with disturbing the peace and broadcasting false information on a Coptic Christian TV station. The programs documented the political unrest in Egypt and extremist Muslim attacks on Christians. Maghazi's attorney says the real reason his client was sentenced was because he abandoned Islam and became a Christian. He had previously been jailed and tortured by Egyptian state security agents who wanted him to return to Islam. CBN's Orphans Promise is helping needy Roma families through the SEED program in Ukraine. This season, 14 villages from Transcarpathian region are participating. 30 hectares of land are used for raising crop and animals to help 236 needy families. Even children pitch in to help with planting crops and collecting eggs. While the crisis continues in eastern Ukraine, life goes on as normal in western Transcarpathia, with expectations of the largest harvest ever this year. Well, you can find out more about what CBN is doing around the world by logging on to cbn.com/international.